If you're stuck in a regular job with a regular life, with no freedom, no rizz or luxurious time to yourself, you're going to relate to Yuji Sano. A guy like him couldn't possibly defeat dragons of mass destruction or achieve high status in the guilds, right? You're about to be proven dead wrong, because he's got a lot of twists in this story that are going to shock his allies, enemies, and fans. Let's join the Emperor of Slimes on his exciting tale. Finding himself in an unfamiliar forest, a guy sees a strange window take shape before his eyes. He discovers a slime monster comfortably looking at him. The tale begins by establishing the introduction of Yuji Sano, who is a corporate slave working a crappy life at a company. His hobbies include gaming, but these days, he's finding it tough to spare time to play any game. Yuji Sano's work life troubles him, and he doesn't even see any salary raises to motivate him to stay. He thinks that he is being exploited by the company, which is overworking its staff to death. Like I just described capitalism, he's onto something. Annoyed by the bizarre task that appeared on his computer screen, Yuji Sano thought that a virus had taken over his computer and that he should restart the system at once. However, his failure to reply basically confirmed his answer by default. Yuji Sano shared a puzzled expression at first, but he was in an entirely different world the following moment. Bro probably thinks he got yeeted into another planet because of a computer virus. Believing that he collapsed from overwork, Yuji Sano thinks that he should have woken up in a hospital bed instead of a random forest. He copes with the reality put before him and thinks that he is having a dream of some kind. Yuji thinks that he might have fallen asleep right before his computer and that he should wake himself up and finish his work. However, the question remains before him: how should he wake up in the first place? Yuji contemplates the idea of dying in his dream, but then he sees a strange blob monster or a slime, and recalls having seen the same monster many times in his video games. Yuji wonders if he should be attacking this adorable looking thing, and if he is in a dream about a game, dying should reset the dream automatically. He prepares himself for what he should do, and falls to the ground to accept inevitable death. At this time, certain stats hover before his eyes, deeming his class a tamer with a single skill called Taming. Although they're pretty average stats, the slime is strangely affectionate and drawn to Yuji, who describes the creature as an odd sensation, bearing neither the shape of a solid nor a liquid. Yuji is starting to grow concerned, since his dream feels a little too real for comfort. At this point, an achievement dialogue pops up before him, claiming that he has tamed the slime creature because of his skill. Taking a stand, Yuji finds it bizarre that he has tamed the slime, and thinks that it won't be attacking him anytime soon, since it is an ally. Yuji proceeds to wander into the forest until he finds a human structure before him. He is looking for ways to die, and thinks that he should drop his health bar to 0 to void the dream. When he discovers the abandoned house, Yuji thinks to explore it. Yuji enters the house and finds a giant bookshelf. He thinks that the bookshelf should be enough to completely obliterate his health points in a single motion. However, when he visualizes the gruesome thought of death being crushed by the heavy object, suddenly, he doesn't feel so bright about the idea. My dude literally just escaped from his work life, and he already wants to die. Yuji also remembers that he had set an alarm back at home, and thought that he should wake up by dawn anyway. Yuji decides to prolong his so-called dream sequence, because he is now relieved that he will wake up from his nap and return to his casual life. His attention returns to the bookshelf before him, and he thinks that he should play around and explore the world, until his alarm rings. Yuji extracts one of the books from the shelf with a title that reads Grimoire of Divine Destruction. Confused, Yuji thinks that the title is a little too corny and must have been written by a nerd. Suddenly, he wonders if he's the nerd for having a crappy dream like this. Yuji shrugs off the thought and decides to read the contents of the book, even though he doesn't comprehend most things anyway. I like how he gets sudden self-awareness. Bro is fighting himself. While he is exploring the contents of the book, certain symbols and spell crests begin to envelop and appear before him. Yuji is confused, while the system relays that his skills have just taken an upward trajectory, as he now has fire magic, water magic, earth magic, and even wind magic. His stats have also taken a buff from before, and he has just learned how to learn magic by simply exploring a single book. Yuji finds this feature of his dreamy game to be rather convenient. If this happened in real life, we would all be Harvard students. Tugging on his shoe, the slime draws Yuji's attention to something. When Yuji turns to look, he is alarmed by the absurd number of slimes that are friends of the one he has. Unable to detect any hostility from the creatures, Yuji doesn't feel worried and questions whether he should tame the adorable looking beings. He's fine with the idea, but doesn't know how to go about executing it. That's when all of the slimes begin to illuminate, while Yuji himself receives dozens of magical notifications, informing him that he has tamed the many slimes before him. When Yuji confirms his stats, he is shocked to discover that he has tamed 80 slimes in a single motion. Knowing this, Yuji thinks that his game system might be a little too convenient for him. Yuji has also added minion magic and enchantment magic to his list of buffs, which is once again an unexpected turn for him. The bundle of slimes begins to approach him, leaving Yuji to question what they're doing. The slimes actually explore the contents of the many books on the giant shelf. The best part is that, whenever they complete a book, Yuji gets to reap the benefits, as his body gains an unnatural number of upgrades to go about it. The system tells Yuji that his class has updated to a sage as well, allowing him a dozen more magic skills. With these powers, Yuji starts to realize his boosts, especially after he has received a second class. Questioning his ability to use magic, Yuji decides to wind up a magic spell to test the scope of his abilities. His stomach doesn't treat him well, and basically reminds the guy that food is necessary for survival. Yuji shrugs the thought and turns to the slimes, who begin to squeak as if to inform him something. Tapping into his mutual communication skill as a benefit of the Tamer class, Yuji starts hearing the slimes in a language that he comprehends. The slimes actually advise him to eat the leaves outside, along with the edible grass for survival. Wondering if the only food available in his dream is leaves and grass, Yuji reaches for the door to find himself something to eat. However, the moment he clasps onto the door handle, Yuji's body trembles as he senses the wake of an earthquake. With the slime monsters all intimidated, Yuji opens the door to discover the chaotic sensation emerging from the forest. When Yuji lays his eyes on the creature before him, the giant claws of a dragon impose a threatening aura, as the beast glares at the human only a fraction of its size. Yuji thinks that he may have found himself a high-level meal when he wasn't expecting any. He is bashed by the dragon's tail, an attack that he fails to evade and is struck by. Crashing into the tree, Yuji's stats take a massive hit, yet at the same time, he doesn't feel threatened by death. Yuji begins to question his dream reality even more as the dragon stares down at him. Reflecting on the fact that he has to actually defeat the dragon, Yuji realizes he must come up with a potent spell. Extending his hand in the dragon's direction, Yuji activates his Hellfire of Demise skill, an attack that annihilates the very existence of the dragon. In fact, the attack is so powerful that it creates a massive geyser of energy upon impact, causing an explosion that is visible from space. My guy is trying to destroy Earth or something, like, damn. When the explosion subsides, only Yuji remains as the victor on the battlefield. Yuji's slimes comfort him, while he wonders the kind of world-ending spell that he used. The slimes roar in celebration of Yuji defeating the dragon, as if they had been waiting for this outcome. Yuji doesn't like the fact that they've started calling him their master. The slimes suggest a number of replacements instead of the word master, but Yuji doesn't like any of them. When asked about what he should be called, Yuji contemplates that he should let them call him by his second name, yet he discards the thought because he is traumatized by his work life. Instead, Yuji hands them his first name, Yuji, and thinks that he should return to his task of looking for food. While he's thinking of the dragon, Yuji experiences a sudden hallucination that leaves him with a massive headache. He wonders if it is due to the fact that he is feeling hungry. Deciding to check his stats, Yuji discovers that he is experiencing the effects of excessive magic usage. He realizes that his previous spell consumed an immense amount of his mana points. Yuji also reminisces about the fact that he has been hit with a negative penalty of 200,000 points for tapping into magic far beyond his points. Whoa, the negative point system, I bet you weren't expecting that. He contemplates how his health points didn't decrease much, even when the dragon slammed into the tree. At the same time, the sickness is bearing a secondary effect on him, as it has affected his health points enough for them to take a dip. Wondering if this aspect is also related to his mysterious dream theory, Yuji is having a hard time accepting the coherence of the world that he is in. He doubts his experiences as a dream, since he has never felt the concept of hunger or pain in dreams before. He also thinks back to the moment when he came across the strange message on his computer, which said something about being summoned to another world. Taking a breath of relief, Yuji thinks that he doesn't mind if this world isn't a dream, since his nightmarish work environment horrifically strikes him. He is aware that he will soon discover if he is truly dreaming thanks to his trusty alarm clock, which is primed to wake him up. In the meantime, Yuji tries to scout for food. He turns up to the dragon's incinerated body and notices how he has reduced the beast to mere bones with his attack. Yuji wants to hold himself back from incinerating everything in his path, while the slimes advise him to turn to the leaves for food. Yuji doesn't welcome the opportunity to eat a leaf and thinks that he will only succumb to it if he has no other options. Yuji thinks that meat should be safe for him to consume, so long as he is able to cook it. He asks the slimes for monsters in the nearby location, preferably without poison. Worried, the slimes explain that although there were monsters before, his magic spell has scared them all away. Baffled, Yuji thinks that the monsters aren't to blame for witnessing a devastating spell like that out of nowhere. The dude nearly brought the apocalypse. Of course, the monsters were like, peace out. Yuji decides to expand his search. With a sudden realization, Yuji thinks that he should test something first. He orders the slimes to split, which actually works as they begin to morph their bodies into two pieces of the same whole. With this, they have just about doubled their number. Yuji is glad to have achieved what he envisioned in his mind, and he thinks that scouting will be much faster with this amount. Yuji orders his slimes to burst into the forest, where they begin to explore his task. One of the slimes comes to discover a moving creature. Yuji is informed of the creature's location and realizes that he should activate the Sense Share spell to allow him perfect communication with his monsters. Applying the spell, Yuji is able to peer into the eyes of the slime and sees the monster directly in front of him. The horned boar appears before his eyes, and Yuji is astonished to share the exact vision of the slime. Yuji acknowledges the size of the boar and thinks it can be considered a monster as well. He wonders about the amount of food that could be produced from a single boar, because it would be too much for a single person like him to eat. Meanwhile, Yuji's slime begins to lose its crap as the raging boar rushes towards the creature. The adorable creature is knocked into next week by the boar, rendering it some heavy pain. Justice for slime. Write slime best character to show your support for our fallen soldier. More or less, Yuji is surprised that the slimes don't really have much of a resistance to physical attacks because of their shape. The wasted slime confirms that they do have resistance, except it's obviously not capable of fending off a force of doom for them. Inspecting his inventory, Yuji questions the kind of skill he should deploy for the situation. The boar returns to finish off the slime, giving it massive PTSD from the previous attack. Yuji spots an adequate skill and decides to activate Monster Enhance. Monster Enhance allows his slime to survive the full force of the impact without feeling any of the damage. While the slime was expecting to die, it ended up in a recovered state. Lol, that slime probably saw the afterlife when that bull was charging towards it. Witnessing this turnaround, Yuji thinks that the spell may have improved the slime's resistance to physical attacks. Yet again, Yuji experiences a raging headache and turns to his stats to discover his dwindling health points every time he uses magic. Yuji deems it impossible to deal with his enemies with this approach. Even though he is tired, Yuji decides to use one more magic skill, aiming to consume the littlest amount of his points. Yuji activates a spell Teleport, which is basically a tamer skill for his class. The skill basically creates a magic portal at a given location, and fires the destructive beam, obliterating the boar with a single beam. With the monster left defeated, the slime is baffled by what occurred. Yuji is glad that he was able to slay the monster, and finds the skill useful. There is also the fact that the fireball skill doesn't consume much of his magic. However, Yuji is still alarmed by his flailing health points, which are stuck at around 20, a fraction of what they should be. Knowing that he is starved for food, Yuji thinks he should consume the boar and rest afterward. He instructs the slimes for the job. The slimes begin to gather together, morphing into one giant blob with its sheer size. The blob consumes the defeated boar and uses its body as a container. The conjoined slime delivers the defeated boar to their master. Yuji is left questioning how he should cook the monster, knowing that his fireball skill isn't enough for the job. Yuji decides to take one slime out of the conjoined hole and raise it up in the air. Yuji claims that he wants to find a nearby town, while the slime is left questioning why it is being raised. At a moment's notice, Yuji uses the extent of his physical might and throws the slime to the very skies. The slime cries in terror and reaches a point where it discovers a town from above. I like how this manga is about a guy abusing slimes, Shakespearean levels of perfection. Discovering the town from afar, the slime is dazzled to think that it's actually floating in the sky. Well, that doesn't turn out too well for the blob, because it suddenly descends at an incredible pace. The slime splats on the ground and reminds Yuji that he is supposed to catch the little creature. After Yuji has relayed the information about the existence of the town, he finds it strange to discover that it is nearby. Yuji is overwhelmed by his hunger pangs, while the slimes direct his attention to monsters that he could defeat. Yuji doesn't feel confident defeating monsters because of his health points. Deciding to take a detour, Yuji heads over to Fasten, where he discovers a farmer along with many other people chatting. Yuji is impressed by the town's fantastical nature and finds the setting hyper-realistic. He admires the craftsmanship of the weapons, notices how well the clothes are made, and even spots the delicious food. All in all, Yuji only cares about the food and wonders if they will even understand his language. Suddenly, a voice calls him from his left. The voice came from an imposing man with a giant blade, who towers over Yuji. The musclehead takes note of the stranger's clothes and questions if it is his first time visiting Faston. Yuji doesn't offer communication at first, and realizes that his clothes really do make him stand out from the people of Faston. Because his question was ignored, the imposing man reminds Yuji of the conversation. Yuji wonders if the man is interested in a fight, and takes note of his shiny blade. Knowing that he should avoid fights, Yuji is courteous enough to answer about his situation. The man shares his astonishment at finding Yuji in Faston, since it's not the safest time of day to travel outside the walls. Yuji also learns of an adventurer system, special to Faston, and denies himself having one. The man recommends Yuji not to leave Faston for the day, since there has been an influx of monsters with abnormal powers. Yuji is surprised that the man is actually worried about him instead. The man shares how there was an explosion of mass destruction only a while ago. Yuji recalls the explosion and realizes that it came from his Hellfire of Demise spell from when he was taking down the giant dragon. The man informs him that the explosion may be linked to an actual disaster of a spell that transcends all of humanity, since it has terrified the townsfolk. Yuji wonders if his special is really that special, and finds himself lucky to have made it here in one piece. He also thinks of the man as a friendly figure, aside from his looks. Yuji thanks him and inquires about the possibility of him becoming an adventurer, realizing that he doesn't have any money. The question wondrously strikes the man and tells Yuji there is an exam that requires physical stamina for the task. When he asks about Yuji's class, Yuji turns to his slimes and decides to tell him that he's a tamer. However, the class tamer doesn't really impress him all that much. The man breaks it to him that the reality is that one has to bear a class capable of using weapons or magic. Yuji claims that he knows how to use magic as well, and wonders if his being a sage would work. The man contemplates his words, and is surprised to discover about the sage class. Yuji wonders if his class doesn't belong to the major hierarchy. He thanks him and decides to give the exam a shot. The man bids him the best of luck and introduces himself as Gale, a swordsman of Faston. Yuji shares his name as well, and reflects that Gale is actually a pretty nice guy. Navigating through the city, Yuji is excited to take on the adventurer exam. He tries to locate a guild nearby, and eventually spots the Adventurers Guild. Yuji enters the structure and finds many guild members flocking about. He reads the sign that instructed him about the exam. Yuji heads over to the receptionist, who politely asks if he is interested in taking the membership exam. Lily introduces herself, and Yuji tells her that he is interested. Lily hands him an application form and suggests he fill it out. Yuji realizes that there isn't a guarantee that he will truly pass the test, and thinks that he should be honest with his abilities for a better chance. When filling out the application, Yuji notices the multiple choice options he has to fill out about the class. The problem is that the choices don't include a sage class, although it still has tamer on the list. Because of this, Yuji circles the tamer class instead. After finishing up the document, Yuji hands Lily the application, which reminds him not to write false information about himself. Yuji reflects that he only wrote something that was identical to his stats, and wonders if his application sounds weak. Yuji also decides to add Sage as a class on his right, next to the Tamer class, and submits it. Lily's expression grows into one of concern, and she advises him not to be bold to write a class of his own. Lily crosses out the Sage class, leaving him to wonder if the guild is really strict. Lily proceeds with her demand of 150,000 Chikhal as an exam fee. Yuji is surprised by the notion of a fee requirement, while Lily is surprised that he wasn't aware of the concept. Yuji is fed up because he just arrived in this world, and obviously doesn't know much. He thinks to himself and wonders how he should acquire heaps of money in a really fast way. When his slimes ask for his attention, Yuji realizes that they can actually read his thoughts. Yuji realizes that he can communicate with the slimes using telepathy as well, wondering if this skill is part of his arsenal as the Tamer class. The slimes recommend Yuji to sell the monster that he had slayed. Yuji confirms if they're talking about the boar monster and questions where they are hiding it. The slimes merge into one and decide to expunge the monster from its mouth. The sight of the dead beast alarms not only Lily, but also the others, and they're glad to see that it's only dead. Yuji thinks that the slimes are capable of storage magic. However, the slimes explain that it's actually Yuji's skill instead. He wonders how he has a ton of useful skills that he needs to explore in detail, since he has many that he has yet to try. This guy is like the jack of all trades. He's got a spell for everything. Yuji turns his attention to the people, all of whom are fixated on the man who brought a monster inside the guild. Yuji's game plan is to sell the monster and confirm with Lily the case. Yuji declares that he wants to sell the monster at once, while Lily tells him to wait. Because of this, Yuji is led to believe that the guild may not have set a standard price for each monster. He thinks that the monster is weaker than the dragon, and wonders if he should have more of them, even though his health points are still low. An elderly warrior comes to meet Yuji, deeming the monster to be a creature one has never seen before. When the assistant manager inspects the beast, he shockingly unveils that the creature is called the Burst Bull. Despite his reaction, Yuji doesn't feel excited, and questions the amount the bull would sell for. The assistant manager begs Yuji for an inspection, and is allowed to do so. While he is inspecting the Burst Bull, Yuji wonders why the man reacted in such an odd manner. The assistant manager declares the condition to be good, and questions how a tamer was able to defeat the beast. Yuji stumps them with his answer, claiming to use magic. The assistant manager is shocked, since magic isn't supposed to be a thing associated with a mere tamer. Yuji is surprised to learn of this fact, and reveals that he has a second class called a sage. However, this revelation only divulges the manager into a more animated state, revealing that it is impossible for one to have two job classes. The assistant manager thinks that Yuji is just an ordinarily confused man, and judges that Yuji is a tamer because of the slimes. He questions if Yuji is truly capable of wielding magic. Yuji confirms that he is and insists on his desire not to use magic, as his powers are running low at the moment. Yuji reflects that his mana points are still in the negative, and even though he could use a fireball at the expense of his health points, he doesn't fancy the idea. The assistant manager allows him to show off his magic during the exam. Yuji claims that he doesn't have the exam fee to participate. The assistant manager realizes that Yuji is looking to sell the boar for the fee, and claims that it would suffice. Yuji is shocked that only one boar is enough to fill in for his fee, and contemplates the value of 150,000 chikhol. The assistant manager offers him a price of 300,000 chikhol. The 30 gold coins before him shock the people around him, which signals to Yuji that it is a lot of money. He inspects one of the coins and thinks that the bull must have been a rare creature. He accepts the trade and pays up the amount for the exam. Lily tells him that they will process his application in the meantime. When the assistant manager sneaks a look at Yuji's application sheet, his soul evaporates. He is unable to put his reaction into words, and thinks that their newest applicant will learn humility when he takes the exam. Yuji, on the other hand, thinks that they consider him pathetically weak. The manager informs him of the exam schedule, and Yuji decides to pick the upcoming day for the cause. The manager is stung by his reaction, as Yuji displays calmness and doesn't seem to require training. Yuji reflects that he doesn't want to wait for a week, and wants to take the exam at once. The manager tells him to arrive at noon, as the exam itself will last for 2 days and a night. Yuji internalizes that it's a long exam, but doesn't seem worried. He thinks that it is less daunting than crunching numbers at the office. Having acquired some money, Yuji is looking to spend some of it on a meal and an inn to stay for the night. He locates the inn and books a room. Yuji reviews the number of events that span over a single day. He also inspects his clothes and remembers Gale's words. Yuji wants to buy an outfit that doesn't separate him from the people of Faston before the exam. Observing the view outside his window, Yuji recalls that Gale warned him of the world outside of Faston. He wonders if adventurers are fighting in the forest, and wants to take a look at himself. Yuji instructs his slimes on the job while they wait for directions. Yuji directs 20 of them to combine and scout for information. He also advises them to return if things get troublesome for him. The slimes merge together and descend from the inn. Yuji finds their mobility convenient, since he doesn't have to look for things himself. Using his sense share ability, Yuji advises the slime to proceed with caution, as other adventurers might be in the mood to tear it to pieces. Then, Yuji further inspects his skills and decides to use his Tamer Detect skill. The skill allows him to pan out and detect all of the monsters in the areas nearby. Yuji senses a great number of the monsters, and senses someone battling against one of the beasts. Their swords strike against the giant monster, as they appear to be a pair of adventurers engaged in a fearsome battle. Yuji muses if these adventurers are on a mission to protect the town. Even though he wants to explore the battle, he decides to lay low for the meantime. Deciding to explore more skills, Yuji deploys monster invisibility magic on his slime, allowing the cute little blob monster to have a sleek camouflage. In a moment of suddenness, the slime is startled by a monster attack. The slime hides to observe the battle. A pack of monstrous wolves has cornered a bunch of adventurers. When Yuji peeks into the identity of the adventurer, he is shocked to discover Gale in a terrible state. Yuji realizes that Gale's party is facing a tough battle and wonders if he should help them. Yuji requests the slime to climb the tree. Gale directs his party to attack together. Their magic warrior chants an incantation spell and deploys wind cutter magic. However, the wolves display impressive mobility and evasiveness, easily getting past her attacks. The monsters are about to devour them whole, when one of the warriors blocks the attack with his shield, barely clinging on. During this moment, Gale descends from the heavens in the hopes of landing a killing strike. However, even that fails when a second wolf shatters his blade, rendering the attack pointless. With all of their resources expired, the adventurers are about to meet their doom. Gale accepts his fate and resigns himself of hope. Hope doesn't need to be a factor when you have an overpowered sage on your side, because Yuji uses his spell teleport magic and creates a number of portals to bump up the quantity. His magic portals shoot down incredible shots of fireball magic. The meteoric attack annihilates the wolves with an aerial strike, while Gale and his party are left at a loss for words. After the destruction resides, the wolves are barely left standing on the brink of death. Gale and his party question the source of magic and ultimately decide to capitalize on the moment. Gale's team decimates what is left of the injured wolves, while a satisfied Yuji falls to his bed. He thanks the slimes and instructs them to return home. The following day, Yuji acquired that S-tier drip, which was properly styled among the people of Faston. He heads over to the guild, where his examiners are waiting. Rizin introduces himself to the exam candidates and explains that he will be the supervisor. He explains that they have 3 knights, 2 mages, and, well, exactly 1 tamer among the applicants. Rizin doesn't seem to be fond of Yuji, and questions whether the tamer can deploy magic at all. Yuji reflects that the tamer class is looked down upon, and they aren't supposed to use magic, emphasizing that he didn't write any misinformation on his application. Yuji is told that his words will be put to the test in the exam. The candidates talk of the mysterious battle involving slimes the previous night, as one of the parties was saved by them. Yuji is surprised that his slimes were discovered, despite the invisibility magic. The candidates mock the people who think highly of the slimes, leaving Yuji to question reality. Rizin tells Yuji that he should stop being a polite man, if he has what it takes to be an adventurer. This guy wants to be humbled, like, come on. Yuji reflects that formal speech usually indicates where a person lies in the chain of command. He learned to speak politely as a defense mechanism against his bosses. Rizin informs them that the first exam will be composed of mages. He points to one of the candidates and reveals a mana-gauging globe, advising the girl to put her hand on the object. The girl proceeds to do as she is told, and the globe reacts with fire, indicating that she has acquired a decent amount of magic. Rizin deems her suitable for being an adventurer, and since he is in a pleasant mood today, Rizin instructs Yuji to place his hand on the globe. He wants Yuji to be exposed for his lies, and claims that the orb will fail to glow if he is unable to use magic. Yuji draws his hand near, understanding his intention, and asks if it is okay for him to touch the object. Rizin gives him the green signal, and Yuji proceeds to do just that. However, the second his hand touches the globe, it shatters into a million pieces, leaving Rizin and the other adventurers baffled for words. Yuji remains the most unaffected by the event, and questions if this passes him as an adventurer. Rizin's composure is demolished, and he copes with the situation by stating that the crystal is defective. He decides to put another one in its place, and tells Yuji to redo the exam. However, the moment Yuji is about to touch the globe, Rizin realizes that he might actually break it again, which stops him from doing so. Rizin deems his magic power immeasurable, while Yuji inquires if anyone else bears the same status. Rizin explains that no such being has appeared in an exam, although there was a story of crystal balls shattering in the era of Magi's the Dragon Blight. Bro is being compared to literal gods, he's just that guy. The adventurers are shocked to realize that the tamer has performed a feat of legend. Yuji realizes that Magi's is actually a prominent figure in the history of this world. Rizin explains that he doubts Yuji's abilities compared to the legendary Magi's, but still finds his powers to be comparable. The tamer acknowledges his powers, and realizes that he was wrong in his assumption to think of himself as a weak person. With the magic inspection test concluded, they are now faced with a combat exam. The candidates informed that the mages would assault the giant boulder with an attack spell. The mages step to the field, while Yuji questions if a weapon is necessary for the test. Rizz is amazed that Yuji is planning to use magic without a staff, while Yuji thinks that it is totally normal for him. Rizz thinks that Yuji is bluffing in his use of magic, and claims that he will be wasting their time. Yuji knows that Rizz is ultimately fed up with him, and thinks that he should have done more research before attempting the exam. Yuji internalizes a way to show his magic without the staff, and wonders what magic he should use. Rizz tells the candidate that it's his turn to take the exam. Rizz mocks him and advises the candidate to postpone his exam, because he doesn't believe Yuji can pull off such a feat. However, Yuji doesn't pay any mind to his words, and immediately extends his hand for a fireball attack. The fireball demolishes the boulder and leaves a heavy mark. Because it only leaves a mark, Yuji starts to think that his magic isn't too strong in the end. He thinks that Rizz will be greatly disappointed. Well, to summarize, Rizz reacts like he has seen a ghost of some kind. Rizz questions how Yuji was able to deploy magic, without even the use of an incantation spell. Yuji wonders if he means that he should be uttering the word fireball before casting the spell. Rizz confirms and claims that Yuji didn't voice his magic at all, as wordless magic is considered a high-level technique that actually reduces the powers of one's spells. Yuji thinks that it must be the reason his fireball isn't too strong, and requests Rizz for a second attempt. Rizz tells him that he is allowed a total of 3 tries as a candidate. Before Rizz is able to finish his sentence, Yuji utters the incantation and shoots a fireball so powerful that it causes the boulder to explode from existence. Rizz's face is a delicacy of a reaction, which is the same for the rest of the adventurers who fail to comprehend Yuji's powers. Yuji considers the incantation an improvement, and believes that there must be a more efficient way to increase firepower. This time, Yuji thinks that he should activate his Hellfire of Demise magic to pack a real punch. Oh no, he's going to smoke him lol. However, Rizz's reaction spells otherwise, and he deems Yuji a freak of nature. Yuji is underwhelmed, because he basically used the same spell twice, just with incantation the second time. Yuji confirms with Rizz, questioning his words and if his first attempt was weak. Rizz shouts at him, emphasizing that he meant the opposite. It is because Yuji is far too strong. Yuji inquires if he passed the second aspect of the exam. Rizz confirms that he passed with flying colors, and is led to wonder about the kind of life Yuji has been living up to this point. Yuji spaces out from his words momentarily, and declares that he lived a pretty normal life. Can you guys believe that this is the same office worker? Yeah, me neither. Rizz bashes him because no one in their right mind would ever be able to learn such powerful spells while leading a normal life. The third aspect of the exam comes in the form of sword play. Rizz tells the warriors and tamers to step forth. A swordsman with a giant blade comes forth and asks if he can use his full powers. Since Rizz prepares himself as his opponent, he draws his blade and allows the candidate full freedom to do so. A man lunges forth with a strike from above, while Rizz reacts swiftly by countering his blade and easily wins the battle. Rizz acknowledges the candidate's strength, but states that he lacks control. Rizz is looking forward to his next battle and wonders if Yuji is planning on fighting without a sword. Yuji internalizes how confident he is in wielding magic without a staff, but he doesn't feel the same about his sword skill. While inspecting the skills from his inventory, Yuji finds one useful for the task. He casts a sword summon, and a blade begins to rise from the ground. Yuji also intends to use fencing and enhance sword techniques in this battle. The way he drew his sword already intimidated Rizz, who couldn't even comprehend how he was able to create a blade out of magic. Because this guy is him, that's how. Rizz signals the beginning of their battle, while Yuji goofily holds a blade for the first time in his entire life, hoping for his super combat arts skill to kick in when he needs it most. Rizz is astounded by the strange grip, and wonders if it has anything to do with Yuji's fighting style. Yuji claims that he doesn't really have a fighting style, and he's more or less adapting. In his heart, Yuji begs for his skills to kick in for this battle. Rizz prepares his blade and initiates the battle, while Yuji is the first one to make his attack. Yuji uses the same downward slash that Rizz's previous opponent used. Rizz considers the attack amateurish, and fends off Yuji's blade with a single swing. His second attack is aimed right at Yuji. However, that is exactly when Yuji's combat abilities activate, allowing him the reflexes of a literal god. The mage with the skills of the ultimate warrior is quick to defeat Rizz in a flash. Knowing that his body moved on its own, Yuji thinks that his magic skills played the primary factor in the battle. Yuji checks if he passed the exam, to which Rizz comments that Yuji was pretending to be an amateur, and manage to throw away his guard. Rizz thinks that a top-tier strategy has outsmarted him, but Yuji shatters his dreams by claiming that he is a mere amateur, who has only just learned how to wield a sword. Rizz doesn't believe his words, because he has witnessed the moves of a master swordsman before his eyes. Yuji asks if they should redo the exam, but Rizz isn't prepared to eat another L for his ego's sake. Bro doesn't want to get smoked, humbled, and sent home a second time. Yuji is glad that his skills and magic helped him throughout the exam. Rizz advises Yuji to go back home, since he has passed each test up to this point, and will crush the other exams as well. Rizz acknowledges his strength and recommends he try for the special category. When Yuji inquires about the special category, Rizz explains that one will be able to start as an H-rank adventurer instead of the typical I rank. Yuji thinks that by taking the special category test, he will be able to start at a much higher rank. He capitalizes on the moment and insists on wanting to take the special category exam. The rest of the adventurers are baffled by his decision, while Yuji wonders if the test is truly that difficult. Rizz tells him that the test is ordinary in nature, except it requires a high score to qualify, which only a handful of people have accomplished. Rizz doesn't believe that Yuji is going to be one of those people, but offers him the chance anyway. Resuming the exam, Rizz advises him that everything will get much harder. Rizz leads them right into the forest, and after enough trekking, Yuji notes that the forest is under the guild's control. Rizz tells them to lay down their tents, and tasks all of them to defend their tents until morning. Yuji has 2 questions and asks Rizz if he can use his slimes for assistance. Rizz confirms that he can use his abilities, since he is a tamer in class. For his second question, Yuji wants to know what makes the exam seem so difficult. Imbuing seriousness in his words, Rizz suggests Yuji be careful about the exam. They will be left defending all for themselves the entire night, a feat that can prove daunting for even the most talented adventurers. Yuji compares it to his office job, and reflects that his company didn't care for 2 or 3 all-nighters in a row. Lol, it's like his whole life has been preparing him for this role. That's hilarious. Answering his queries, Rizz tells them to disperse, as the exam will begin after they lay their tents. That night, Yuji is resting outside his tent, and considers the exam boring. He thinks that maybe the boredom makes the exam really difficult in the end. Yuji has already prepared his slimes to scout the camp's perimeters, and wonders if they have discovered something. When Yuji asks his monsters, one of the slimes informs him that they have found a tasty leaf. It's safe to say that Yuji is underwhelmed by this Pokémon's activities, and disapproves of the leaf. Yuji is not a vegetarian, so get that man the finest monster steak. While he is busy dealing with the slime, Rizz thinks that it is a good moment to catch Yuji while he is at his weakest. He is confident in getting the upper hand, only for Yuji to burst his bubble when he asks the proctor if he is also part of the test. Rizz is stunned that Yuji is aware of his presence, and claims that he isn't part of the test. He admits that Yuji spotted him while he looked completely off guard. Yuji directs him to the slime that became responsible for spotting him. Rizz is surprised, since he has never seen a monster scout with such an impressive ability before. Yuji tells him that he's got an impressive number of slimes, shocking the proctor as he was expecting him to only have 1. Rizz is surprised that Yuji is able to manage 7 monsters at once, to the point where he considers him one of the most powerful tamers. Rizz admits defeat and claims that he will return tomorrow. When he leaves, Yuji wonders if this marks the end of the exam. He knows that Rizz hasn't exclusively told him about the outcome, and suspects that the exam is still in motion. Suddenly, one of the slimes turns his attention to an inconspicuous creature in the forest. When Yuji is told about the monster hiding in the woods, he realizes that the creature must be using magic to conceal their presence. Yuji transfers a spell to the slime. The spell basically illuminates the forest, but even with the illumination, there is no one to be found. Yuji wonders if the person or monster is using optical camouflage of some kind. He wonders if the creature is trying to go around them, and decides to look for heat detection magic in his inventory. Yuji discovers a craft spell skill, which freely allows him to create a spell of his own. Yuji thinks that he is short on time, and decides to make use of his available resources instead. He instructs his slimes to gather and form a giant circle that faces outwards. The slimes heed his instructions and begin to create such a circle. They form a circle around him, and so Yuji reaches the second stage of his plan, adopting a detection barrier. The detection barrier puts up an invisible shield that detects any object that interacts with it. Yuji plans to use his slimes for detection. Suddenly, Yuji senses the creature approaching the barrier and immediately uses his spell transfer magic to bind the person in place. Then, he summons his blade and holds the captive on edge. Yuji strictly instructs the person not to move. Suddenly, the man begins to shape into existence, conceding victory. He tells Yuji to remove the net as the exam doesn't necessitate fighting. When Yuji frees him from the bind, the man introduces himself as wise. He tells Yuji that he will report the outcome to his superiors, as getting caught is a big deal. Yuji is confused because he was tasked with finding the hidden instructors anyway. Wise tells him that he wasn't part of the exam, as he is one of the guild's top secret agents. He also tells Yuji that only 10 people are capable of catching him in the forest, as it is no easy feat. Yuji internalizes that Wise is excellent at hiding, and questions why he's here at all. The man explains that his job is to sneak into the tents of the examinees and emphasize how difficult the missions can be. Yuji questions if Wise is intentionally trying to make them fail. Wise confirms that he is, as many adventurers make the mistake of lowering their defenses and end up dying in surprise raids. Wise tells him that his role is to eliminate examinees to prove that they can't let their guard down, except Yuji became an obstacle to his mission. Yuji questions if Wise wants to retry the attempt. Wise has the same reaction as rizz and wants to save himself from being humbled twice, so he declines. Wise tells him that he's going to report the outcome to the guild, which will allow him to get more than just a perfect score. Yuji thinks that it is troublesome and hopes to pass with a regular score. With that, Wise leaves. The next day, rizz announces the end of the special category exam. The adventurers emerge from the forest, entirely defeated and deprived of their strengths. Yuji remains unaffected and thinks they had a rough time. Rizz explains that he has received the guild's report of the results. He calls for Asia's name, announcing him as a failure in nearly all categories. While Rizz is busy announcing results, Yuji is chilling and recalls that the exam pass rate is around 40%. For the final candidate, Rizz calls for Yuji's name. He stares down his report, only to grow impressively shocked by what he has just read. Rizz tries to reconfirm the score, but is left with a headache, wondering how Yuji was able to attain such a high score. Finally, Rizz declares Yuji to be the only one who passed the special category exam, and qualified as a B-class scout. The rest of the candidates are utterly shocked that he has obtained 2 high-level ranks at once. Yuji isn't too impressed by B rank, and wonders if it is special at all. Rizz questions why he isn't so surprised. Yuji inquires further about the B-class scout, leaving Rizz with an absurd reaction. Rizz elaborates on the ranking system, as being classified as a B-class scout signifies his top-ranking lookout skills. He is also considered the first person to have qualified for the special category in over a decade. Rizz dismisses the group and instructs them to report back to the guild. Yuji is greeted by one of the guild maids, who congratulates him on passing. She explains that he will be provided a guild card, along with the system of the guild. The guild system uses adventurers to accept quests, at most a rank above their level. That means any newcomers in the I rank can accept quests from the H rank as well. Because of Yuji's special category status, he starts directly from H rank, and is able to access quests up to G rank. She tells him that the difficulty of the quest dictates rank increase upon completion. Yuji reads between the lines and figures that he can raise his rank if he clears G-rank quests. The receptionist reminds him that many people die fighting monsters that are above their capabilities, which is why it is recommended to accept quests equal to one's own rank. She handed him the guild card and wished Yuji the best. Yuji accepts the card and reads that he is considered a tamer class, with an identified magic type of fire. Yuji realizes that they omitted most of his magic skills and his sage class status. He doesn't really care now that he has registered for the guild. Yuji turns to the quest board in the hopes of taking a quest. Scouting for an easy quest, Yuji spots an herb collection quest of I rank status. Yuji takes the quest form to the receptionist and states that he would like to complete it. The receptionist is shocked that he wants to complete a quest immediately after completing his exam. Yuji thinks that it's not because he is a B-class scout, but rather the fact that he has lived like a damn corporate slave. The adventurer makes his leave, and returns shortly after to shock the receptionist. She questions if he abandoned the quest, only for Yuji to call for his slimes, who basically collected the necessary herbs. The slimes racked up a number of Helia herbs, enough to stun the receptionist, who thinks that Yuji bought them. Yuji claims that they are up casually from the forest. She acknowledges that the herbs are too fresh to be considered purchased. When she asks how he was able to transport the amount, Yuji explains that he carried them like he should, basically implying he used slime storage. The girl has the herbs appraised. The appraisal master is shocked to witness someone capable of collecting so many Helia herbs. Yuji internalizes that it was simple for him to show the slimes a picture of the herb and leave them to do the job. He is able to sell the Helia herbs and has completed the quest many times by bringing more of them. The receptionist tells him that there is a chance for him to rank up if he completes a G rank or H rank quest. Yuji asked if slaying quests would be best for those kinds of quests. She gives him the green call and is left wondering the meaning behind his question. Yuji explains that he defeated a bunch of monsters on his way to collect the herbs and wanted to know if they were the targets of some quests. She tells him that he would require proof of slaying the monsters in order to reap the rewards. And guess what? Yuji does exactly that by showing her the pile of dead bodies that he has collected. The reaction of the guild staff and members is truly astonishing, and eventually Yuji is handed an adventurer rank up application. This application ensures that he is going to level up. Yuji also meets the guild's branch manager, Agis. Agis claims Yuji is the first person to have ever cleared the special category mark and is currently the talk of town. Agis tells him that he has to confirm a few things from Yuji's end. Saying that, he then takes out a special object and begins his interrogation. Agis asks if Yuji used his own powers along with the slimes for the membership exam. Yuji confirms that he did. Agis looks towards the magic crystal as if to confirm what he said. Yuji thinks that it might be some kind of lie detector. Agis proceeds with a follow-up question, asking Yuji if he really picked the Helia herbs and killed the monsters on the way. When Yuji pinpoints his answer to the tiniest detail, the stone once again fails to react. Agis is certain that Yuji is telling the truth and approves his promotion. Agis congratulates Yuji for achieving the fastest rank G record ever, handing him a brand new rank G guild card. Agis tells Yuji that he is now an official adventurer. He advises him not to take on immensely difficult quests, to which Yuji wonders if he has some easy quests for him. Agis explains that he should try to collect the Drya flowers. Yuji is alarmed and inquires further. The Drya flowers are known to grow in the mountains, and it takes a 3-day round trip to the west. The items are used as ingredients for medicine as well, and Agis thinks that this task is perfectly suited for Yuji, who is good at scouting for herbs. Yuji meditates on the thought, and thinks that he would require a tent and sufficient food for the trip. He takes a night's worth of rest and heads out the following morning, after collecting a tent and enough food. He doesn't appreciate the weight of the luggage, and decides to store all of it in the slime monster. Yuji wonders if there is a storage limit, and thinks that he will figure something out if he runs out of storage. Yuji's journey through the mountains is one of patience. He meditates on Agis' words, and thanks his skills for allowing him more endurance than the average person. But the mental strain of the journey is starting to affect him. Yuji asks his slime monsters if there are any monsters nearby. The slime monster is uncertain and inquires about the reason. Yuji explains that his main profession is that of a tamer, which is why he is looking for a monster that can help him ride and cover the journey. During this conversation, a monster wolf hiding from within the shadows lurks behind Yuji. The wolf growls at the human before lunging forth. Yuji isn't the slightest worried, and he detains the beast with his magical net. The wolf cries in confusion, while Yuji wonders if it is trying to communicate, because he can only talk to other monsters once they have been tamed. Yuji decides to use his monster telepathy skill, and finds out that this wolf is actually a wimp who is begging to be spared. Yuji and the rest of the slimes are extremely underwhelmed at its pathetic display. Yuji explains that he shares no intention of killing the animal, while the wolf apologizes for being pathetic enough to attack him. Yuji finds him pitiful, to the point that he doesn't even want to recruit the beast into his own party. He asks the wolf if it would be fine with the thought of being tamed. The wolf roars in agreement because of his current situation. Yuji makes him a part of his group, and the system declares that he has tamed the proud wolf. Bro destroyed the legacy of his own species, Goddamn. For a name such as the Proud Wolf, Yuji is disappointed that the wolf is lacking its pride. He turns the monster into his personal Uber and rushes toward the mountain. After a while, the wolf brings him to the location and begs him to spare his life. Yuji starts to get annoyed and tells the beast that he is free to go, as he will be using a different monster on his way back. Well, the pathetic wolf begs to have a place in Yuji's party, once again signaling to Yuji that this creature has absolutely no pride. Haha, I just know this guy is thinking of putting him down. He accepts the gesture for the time being, and concentrates on the mission. Yuji knows that the guild informed him of the Dryad flower's location, yet he doesn't find anything that fits the description. He also finds many untamed slimes in the wild. Yuji's own slimes signal their kind to join Yuji's group, but he doesn't have high hopes for them and thinks that they're going to decline. Much to his surprise, the foreign slimes accept him wholeheartedly and automatically allow themselves to be tamed. Yuji realizes that these slimes are gullible beyond hell and easily trust just about anyone. He asks them about the Dryad flowers and even shows them a picture. The slimes confirm having seen the Dryad flower. However, the flowers have been known to disappear without a trace. Yuji wonders if they were totally wiped out because of a change in climate. The slime knows the reason behind the disappearance of the flowers. They inquired if Yuji would be willing to meet Ms. Dryad. Yuji is surprised to hear such a name and accepts. The slime monsters lead him down the path, while Yuji thinks he would never have discovered such a path without a guide. He is grateful for the adorable blobs we all wish we had. Yuji follows the path and eventually discovers a petite girl, Ms. Dryad. Dryad is terrified that a human has come to invade her territory. She tries to hide, which signals a sign of fear to Yuji. The slimes try their best to comfort her by praising Yuji. Dryad musters the resolve to inquire if Yuji would be willing to help her. Yuji tells her that he doesn't know what's happening. The slime explains that an evil person left the forest plagued, and because Dryad is the spirit of the forest, her powers grew exponentially weak. Yuji also realizes that the forest trees are in terrible shape, with Dryad looking similarly weak. Yuji questions whether his mission is to get rid of the so-called weird thing plaguing the forest. He thinks that it will be enough to replenish Dryad's powers. Yuji also decides to use a spell transfer ability on one of his slimes, which further affects Dryad, replenishing all of her stats to an extraordinarily high level. Dryad questions what he just used, while Yuji explains that he shared some of his magic power. Dryad expresses much joy and thanks Yuji for doing so. Next, on Yuji's checklist is taking care of the weird thing. That is messing with Dryad's forests. They venture into the location, where Yuji takes note of the withered trees. Dryad points to the nefarious object that has brought about the death and destruction of the forests. Yuji thinks of it as a mere black stone, and wonders if he should destroy the item at once. Suddenly, Dryad calls out for him, and questions how he is able to touch the object at all. Dryad explains that any person who touches the object is prone to die, which is what some of the humans said. The people who brought the black stone even put it on the end of their staff. The staff has been there for a week, and it's not in top shape, insinuating to Yuji that it was burned. He grows wary of the stone, and checks that his stats remain unaffected. Dryad tells him that the magic stone is cursed, and that curses are a type of magic power. She thinks the reason Yuji remains unaffected is because the curse can barely spoil Yuji's reserve of magic. I'm telling you all, he's just that guy. Yuji tells her that he has only about double the magic power that he shared with Dryad, which comes as a surprise to the girl. Yuji asks if one's magic powers go into the negatives once they run out of it. However, such a concept is foreign to Dryad, who can't comprehend what negative magic is. Dryad calls him an anomaly, and her reaction is enough to confirm to Yuji that negative magic isn't a normal thing for people. Yuji's set on destroying the stone once and for all. He summons his magic blade and tries to shatter the stone with a swing of his blade. However, the stone is so resilient that it shatters Yuji's blade into ashes while remaining unaffected. Yuji is alarmed by the situation and understands the power of the curse. He is even surprised that nothing happened to him while he was carelessly inspecting it. Thinking of adopting other procedures, Yuji decides to use magic instead of physical attacks. Yuji doesn't want to get carried away with an insanely strong attack, so he sticks to a smaller spell to do the job. He tells the slimes to stand on the circle to enclose the magic stone. Once enclosed, Yuji deploys his anti-magic and physical barriers, using his slimes as a proxy. Yuji designated the coordinates of the barrier facing inward, ensuring that the spells don't affect anything outside the domain. This man embraced his Jujutsu Kaisen legacy and straight up pulled a domain expansion. Yuji rejects the thought of using Hellfire of Demise because of its energy requirement, and sticks to a slightly weaker attack. That slightly weaker attack is actually the Hellfire of Decimation, an abominable force that acts like a small nuke, and annihilates everything inside the enclosed barrier. Even the slimes are intimidated by the blast, to the point that they feel confident it is enough to take down a dragon. My guy recreated Hiroshima inside his slime domain expansion. Got him.